Good afternoon, good evening to all my LFA TV family members, coast to coast. My name is Joey Vantes, and I'm your host here on the Vantes Point for this next hour here on this beautiful Monday, August 25th, 2025 transmission. And I want to thank all of you, especially for being here with me and for participating in our session for today. Listen, if you're new to the channel, please be sure to hop over to lfatv.us, and there you can get access to all of the latest and greatest details, shows, donations. You can get a hold of our store. And if you click on our news link, you can tap into the latest popular conservative news feed from around the nation, including all the articles, including things like the House Oversight Committee update on the Epstein-Maxwell situation, the government insider stuff regarding the massive wealth transfer, and so much more. So be sure to tap in directly there. Listen, also, if you're new to the channel, hop over to my site, joeyvantes.com. Be sure to go in and you can sign up for my Truth Uncensored members only club, $5 a month, or you can pay $50 for the entire year and get access to that. If you ever have issues watching the show directly on Rumble, you can always click directly on my site to the tab that says the Vantes Point, and you can watch our alternative stream link direct from there. You can also pick up some merch like How to Fight Ideological Subversion. It is my ebook that is accessible not only from iOS, meaning an Apple operating system, but also through Android. You can use ebook format or PDF, and there even is an audio version available with it as well. Be sure to pick up your copy today on my site, joeyvantes.com. And you can also pick up the hat there. You can watch the documentary, or you can drop in a donation if you want to support the movement and all that we're doing here. Now, thank you, chat, so much for all of your support, everything you've done to keep me afloat and keep things moving in the right direction, the way that they should be, and it's all because of you. We are not like the mainstream outlets that have access to all the various things that they do. And we're also not controlled by the narratives that they suggest that have to be spoken about. We do things differently here, and so we greatly appreciate your support in this alternative space. Chat, what is up? Appreciate all you being here with me today. Eileen, Denise, the Hip Hop Patriot, Logan 23. I appreciate you guys so much. Carl, what's going on? Let's see, who else do we got in here? 2RM, Tammy. Appreciate all of you being here. All 1,200 of you live in the chat. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are here Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. And if you can hear my voice today, my whole family came down with something. I don't know what it was. And then I ended up finding out a couple days later, it's strep throat. So needless to say, if you see me sipping on water throughout this 1 hour episode, just know that I'm still here with you because we're going to plug away. We got some things that we need to tap into in today's show. So the first thing that I want to start with today, chat, as I've been kind of watching various aspects of the news, watching Trump's encounter today with the Korean prime minister president there and the details concerning all of that, there were a number of things addressed today that were of high importance. I mean, all the way around across the board. We can talk about a couple of things, including one of the executive orders that were signed, because there were two Americas basically being put on display between two different leaders, I guess you can say. One is a real leader, one is not. And what do I mean by that? Well, President Trump signed an executive order directing the federal crackdowns of the flag desecrations. And he says, look, anyone burning the American flag should face up to a year in jail. And I think that's completely fair. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Meanwhile, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz is caught on stage sneering that there's a hell of a lot of flags with Trump's picture on it that need to get burned down, right? And ultimately what he's saying is he's inciting criminal activity and hostility and this rage and violence against President Donald Trump for the fact that he's saying, let's protect our flags, our nation's flag. And so you have here two directions. You have one nation, and you got to choose which direction you're going to follow. And for context purposes, let's hear exactly what Tim Walz said in this little twisted weak rant of his. Check this out.
Think of how easy it would be to be a damn Republican. Oh, what should I wear today? This stupid freaking red hat. What should I say today? I don't know. Just make sure it's cruel. Who do we listen to? That guy. Oh, the felon in the White House? Yeah, listen to him and that will be fine. Now he's talking about burning flags. He's going to have flag burning or whatever, because he knows there's a hell of a lot of flags with his picture on it that are going to get burned.
Yeah, so here you have Tampon Tim, and let's call it what it is. I mean, he's on his time of the month. The guy is an absolute garbage pack. I mean, a complete loser. You still can't get over the fact that you were running behind Kamala Harris. I mean, that's for one. Number two, you still haven't come up with any real justification to what happened to two politicians in your state. Right? You cannot come up with the details of anything. I mean, talk about crime, hands down. Look at what's happened in the state of Minnesota. Like, this guy has any foot to stand on whatsoever, any ground, any foundation to speak about anything, right? And so with respect to what Trump did today, he signed this executive order instructing Attorney General Pam Bondi to vigorously prosecute any flag desecration cases to the maximum extent of the law permitted by the Constitution, and to pursue litigation to clarify the scope of the First Amendment exceptions around incitement and related crimes. So the order also tells the Department of Justice to coordinate with state and local prosecutors where their laws may apply. And it signals immigration consequences for non-citizens, especially, who desecrate the United States flag. So the president's public message was straight up blunt, but it was pure and simple. If you burn the American flag, you should get a year in jail. And I think that's absolutely fair. And I think at the same time, look, Governor Tim Walz here is speaking to Democrats, a jab that Trump was talking about burning flags because he knows there's a whole lot of flags out there with this picture that are going to get burned to the ground. And that's the whole video, right? It wasn't a slip. It was an applause line rhetoric to push this garbage. And the bottom line is the White House is moving to reevaluate national symbols under America First leadership, right? But the Democratic governor of Minnesota is basically mocking that effort and amplifying the idea of mass burning of flags, really is what he's saying. Because what does Trump represent? America, right? And so we're going to be precise here, right? Texas versus Johnson, which is a case from 1989, U.S. versus Eichmann, also from 1990, right around the same time, held that flag burning can be a protected symbol of or symbolic speech, I guess you can say, under the First Amendment. That's the current constitutional backdrop to this whole thing. So there's no executive order that can essentially erase a Supreme Court precedent. But this executive order can direct the Department of Justice priorities, essentially, to test legal theories at the margins, if you will, and prosecute this related conduct that falls outside of that protected speech. For instance, we can talk about incitement to imminent lawless action. We can talk about if this flag burning leads to true threats, if it's arson, if it's vandalism or assault, depending on the facts of the situation at hand. And so those are the things that Trump is basically saying here. So it's not outside of the Supreme Court precedent. But there's also a statute on the books, chat. Okay? There's a statute here that we got to look at. 18 U.S.C. 700. And it basically sets the penalties up to a year for the desecration of the U.S. flag. But after Eichmann, basically, the application of that statute to expressive flag burning is generally unconstitutional, is what they say. It survives, if at all, in non-expressive contexts when tied to other crimes, which we've seen continually happen over and over again. There's really no isolated incident where someone brings a flag out and just starts burning it, burns the flag down, and that's part of their First Amendment speech, and they walk away, right? No, they come, they're breaking things down, they're burning buildings, they're destroying things, property. They're creating all these issues. Oh, and then all of a sudden, after they're done committing their crime, now they want to call this free speech or an act of free speech, right? That's how this has been working out. And so I think the Trump order essentially says, look, enforce where it's enforceable, litigate the gray zones, and punish the speech of crimes that, the non-speech crimes that often accompany these spectacles, expect immediate legal challenges from these civil liberty groups, and expect the DOJ to frame prosecutions around incitement, rioting, property damage, and immigration grounds, especially for non-citizens, chat. And I think that's kind of the way that it goes on this. So the takeaway is that the president is drawing a bright moral line, I believe, and a strategic legal line. The flag is sacred. Criminal conduct wrapped in protest is not going to get a pass. And Wall's line wasn't about defending debate. It was about celebrating destruction. If you look at Minnesota, filled with an unbelievable amount of Muslims and illegal immigrants that they've been protecting as a sanctuary city, then you kind of get the picture of what Tim Walz is at. He hates America. He's always hated America. They want the country to burn down. Thus, they are burning the flag as a representation of that. And so notice where this is being normalized, right? Mass performative burnings as a show of political spite. Even if some of those, are not U.S. flags, we all know where the threat points. It erodes respect for the flag itself. And what does it do? It targets the people who defend it. And we're talking about the same, again, Tim Walz in recent months, who leaned into this escalatory, taunting rhetoric against the president and his voters. And so this is who Tim Walz is in a nutshell. And it should be no surprise that this is the case. Now let's pause here for a quick moment for a commercial break.
Is the continued divide between Trump and the Federal Reserve putting us behind the curve again? Can the Fed take action at the right time, or are we going to be looking at a potential economic slowdown? And what does this mean for your savings? Consider diversifying with gold through Birch Gold Group. For decades, gold has been viewed as a safe haven in times of economic stagnation, global uncertainty, and high inflation. And Birch Gold makes it incredibly easy for you to diversify some of your savings into gold. If you have an IRA or an old 401k, you can convert that into a tax-sheltered IRA in physical gold, or just buy some gold to keep in your safe. But first, get educated. Birch Gold will send you a free info kit on gold. Just text the name Vantes, V-A-N-T-E-S, to the number 989898. Again, text VANTES to 989898. Consider diversifying a portion of your savings into gold. That way, if the Fed can't stay ahead of the curve for the country, at least you can stay ahead for yourself.
Here to announce a landmark victory for the Department of Justice, our law enforcement partners, and the United States of America. As you've heard, drug kingpin Ishmael Zambada Garcia, also known as El Mayo, has confessed to a lifetime of crime in service to the Sinaloa cartel, a foreign terrorist organization. Thanks to the relentless work of our prosecutors and our federal agents, El Mayo will spend the rest of his life behind bars. He will die in a U.S. federal prison where he belongs. His guilty plea brings us one step closer to achieving our goal of elimination of the drug cartels and the transnational criminal organizations throughout this world that are flooding our country with drugs, human traffickers, and homicides. Under President Trump's leadership, the Department of Justice is on the front lines of this fight. We're standing shoulder to shoulder with all of our law enforcement partners to dismantle these narco-terrorists. And that's exactly what they are. They are narco-terrorists. El Mayo was one of the most prolific and powerful drug traffickers in this world. His partner was El Chapo. They were co-founders of the Sinaloa cartel. They brutally murdered multiple people and flooded our country with drugs. Their reign of terror is over. He will never walk free again. Over the last 3 decades, El Mayo and his accomplices made billions of dollars, hundreds of millions each year they were making by bringing poisonous drugs into our country.
Now, this is a interesting point, Chad, right? Because tonight they say a generational predator of the Sinaloa cartel has finally bowed to American justice. AG Pam Bondi has basically said that they had a guilty plea from this cartel co-founder, talking about El Mayo, Zambada Garcia, in federal court in Brooklyn. Now he faces this mandatory life sentence in a U.S. prison with a multi-million-dollar forfeiture on deck, basically, and sentencing set. So, well, it is a victory, in a sense, to the, I guess, the America First crackdown, if you will. This is kind of where the real fight begins, because there's some other things here, I think, that are not being spoken of that really need to be addressed. For one, we can talk about the death of Kiki Camarena, the DEA agent who was viciously going after the cartels and had burned over $1 billion, they said, of drugs, marijuana, at the time when he discovered this. And then he was basically taken from his place where he was, extracted, put into this politician's house in Mexico, brutally beaten and tortured for days. And guess who was at the helm of the torture and the beatings, and also basically collecting information from him? It was the CIA. And it was a gentleman who was quite high up in the CIA. And actually, I think we'll do an episode fully and completely on that. We've actually reached out and connected with the gentleman who was in charge of going after and investigating the death of Kiki Camarena, who eventually was let go by the federal government and basically told either to bow out or that his life was going to be ended. And it's a really wild story. But anyway, going back to this point here, well, this is a great thing that happened here in terms of this person going down, right? Because we're talking about for 5 decades, chat. We're talking about El Mayo helping to engineer the pipeline. We're talking about cocaine, heroin. We're talking meth, fentanyl into American towns and cities, especially here in Arizona, as we've seen, in loads. We're talking about sophisticated tunnel systems that are built, you're talking 50 feet deep and stretching for miles upon miles wide. And the fact is that they're bringing this stuff in this way. So prosecutors laid it out, continuing this criminal enterprise leadership and RICO crimes tied to violence, corruption, and mass trafficking. So in this situation, in this U.S. District Court, in the Eastern District of New York, he admitted it. He finally went out and took the plea, and the judge will basically set the rest of his life behind bars. That's the justice that's being served there. So Bondi had said it plainly. She said, look, this ends this chapter of terror, of poison being pumped into our communities. The Department of Justice alongside the FBI and DEA made it crystal clear there's no kingpin that is beyond reach, if you will. But here's the thing. Let's kind of level with you for just a second. Let's level with each other. Let's level with the American audience who's watching this, because while this is a great win, in cartel politics, cutting off the head or the so-called head of the snake doesn't automatically kill the serpent. Often what happens in these instances is that it splinters. It mutates. And it actually gets even meaner. It gets more corrupt. It gets more savage. We've seen this play out. When a crime boss or a cartel boss falls or factions basically fight, it starts going into these major wars. The Sinaloa network has already fractured, right? The Chapitos versus Mayo's lieutenants. And there's credible reporting that this infighting is basically turned into a lethal mass scale effort where a lot of the public, the innocent bystanders, are the ones who have actually been caught between the crossfire and in most cases are the ones killed. So with El Mayo's plea deal and inevitable life sentence, you got to expect this ambitious, bloodthirsty replacements and now new alliances, including potential temporary cartel conglomerates of convenience, to seize routes, labs, border plazas. All this stuff is going to happen. And that means more violence in Mexico and new tactics at our border unless pressure stays relentless. For instance, it's just been issued out by El Mencho, who is basically the biggest crime boss still remaining at large right now in Mexico, that he has authorized many cartel members on the bordering towns, especially in Arizona and a couple other places in Texas, California, to now send up drones with weaponry to take aim and to try to assassinate ICE and Border Patrol agents who are there on the border. And so this is escalating quite quickly. And this is in retaliation to many of these captures and indictments and prosecutions and things like this with El Mayo. So America has paid dearly, right? We can talk about the fentanyl era that has been this national trauma across the board. You see these people tranked out. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you see them standing there. It's like their legs are tree trunks standing up, but their whole body, is contorted in all these strange positions and whatnot. That's a fentanyl epidemic that's been pouring into this country. And so even with welcome progress, the CDC has been showing that, nearly 27% drop in overdose deaths since 2024. And that's likely towards the end of 2024 as Trump's administration was beginning to transition in. We're still losing tens of thousands of Americans per year. And these cartel networks remain the prime industrial suppliers. Border Patrol seizures of fentanyl hit record levels. And this is proof that the enforcement is biting, but also that supply remains massive. And we can't let off the gas. Now, look, today's DOJ filings here and briefings are saying it plainly. El Mayo's cartel pumped tons of lethal narcotics into the United States, bribed officials, and forced its empire with murder and intimidation. And now he forfeits billions as he's going to die in prison. Right? That's the America First standard in this. Hunt them, indict them, and try them in our courts, lock them away. I think you need to end life when you deal with people like this. I think it has to be just as savage. This is a war. This is not a headline. And you remove one patriarch and underbosses who have been waiting in the wings to basically surge forward and finally get their shot are going to be, basically drooling to do this. And so you got to think of this. It's a criminal IPO, right? Shares get redistributed. Routes must be retaken. Labs must be protected. Shipments have to move because money's still got to be made. That means gunfights. You're talking assassinations, cross-border intimidation, and then escalation with rival syndicates like the CJNG. And then regional outfits that basically smell opportunity and an opportunity for them to rise. And that fight is not going to get kinder. It's going to get uglier first. And so here's why this still matters big time in my perspective as I'm looking at this thing, being very familiar with the border, being very familiar with the outlay of all of these cartel situations. It proves the reach. The United States can indict. They can extradite, they can capture, they can convict, the top of the pyramid, even the ghosts who basically evaded handcuffs for decades. The deterrent matters. And others now know the U.S. courtroom is really their end game in a lot of different ways. It exposes the networks. Even without cooperation, a plea and the associated filings cement facts, right? Talks about the different routes, the shell companies, the lieutenants, the corrupt nodes, if you will. And that intelligence fuels follow-up cases and sanctions. And so it allows things to kind of move in a positive way overall. It aligns the toolbox, if you will. You're seeing the DOJ and the FBI, the DEA, we're talking the HSI, we're talking the treasuries, the CPB, all basically synced up. And so these arrests and prosecutions, these sanctions, and these border seizures are going to tighten the vise, if you will. That whole of government choke is exactly how you strangle this transnational criminal enterprise. So that is important. But let's kind of forecast the battlefield in Mexico and how this basically fuels some of the tactics that we're going to see play out here in the U.S. Because with El Mayo effectively gone, we're going to see wars fueling up. We're going to see local strongmen basically switch jerseys. You're going to see police chiefs get brought in and threatened. You're going to see all this stuff, bribery, etc. And here's the thing. I don't know if you guys have watched this chat. But just recently, we're talking just in the last 24, 48 hours, Mexican Senator Lily Tellez, who went on to Fox and called Mexico a narco state. And this is, most people are like, well, of course, obviously it is. But for somebody who is a Mexican senator to go out and say this while they're living in Mexico, and especially to speak out against the Morena faction of the political party within Mexico, this is massive. Because the Morena faction of the political party in Mexico is all funneled and owned by the cartels, mainly headed by the Sinaloa cartel, and then also with portions of that by the CJNG. And so with this money that's been pumped in here, who is the head of the Morena political party? It is the person who became the president. Who is that? That is none other than Claudia Sheinbaum. Sheinbaum has been the president of Mexico. And if you notice, all of the other candidates who were vouching and vying and trying to get into that office to become the president of Mexico were assassinated. I believe they said there was a total of 47 other candidates who were assassinated, and they pushed her into that position. She is Jewish. That's what she says. But she was pushed into this position by her political party being owned by the cartels. And so for this Senator Lily Tellez to come out on Fox 2 different days in a row and specifically say that the ruling party in Mexico is this Morena political party, and it is narco politics that is running Mexico, and it is being put at the helm by President Claudia Sheinbaum. That's a massive thing to say. It cuts straight to the bone. The charge that the cartel money and political power are intertwined, and to say this out loud, she is putting her life on the line to do so. And it's quite interesting that she's doing this, and hopefully she's worked out some type of deal with the U.S. to get some type of protection, be able to, get covering, if you will. Because likely when you look at the history of Mexico, when people come out like this, especially political figures, immediately you're going to see them within the next 3 to 5 days are dead. That's just the way it works. So here's what matters for you at home about all this. Because if Mexico's political class can't or won't decouple from the cartel influence, then Washington must drive the outcomes that don't rely on wishful thinking. And the fact is that they're right next door to us. This is America first. Arrests like today only bite if we follow through. We got to design to disrupt prosecutions, right? Keep stacking ICE. RICO 21 USC 959, right? This extraterritorial trafficking counts. We're talking about money laundering cases to deny safe havens. That's the kind of work that we have to dive into in order to not only deny the safe havens, but also to freeze cash. We got to have sanctions. We got to have seizures. We got to hit front companies, brokers. In Arizona alone, Cartel Katie, Governor Katie Hobbs, Adrian Fontes. You're looking at the mayor of one of the cities in Tucson, one of the cities which is called Tucson in the South. You're talking about this mayor, Regina Romero, and all that has happened there. These are all cartel-funded individuals. These are laundromats moving millions and billions of dollars. And the amount of crime and corruption and fraud that goes into a state like Arizona, for instance, is beyond me. And it is funded directly by these cartel members. And they know the people who are money hungry and they have a price. They'll take the bait. And this is how they're able to continue their operations into the U.S. It is basically an extension of Mexico. And so we have to have border hardening, but also high-level investigations that go into these individuals running the states, running the cities as mayor, running all these various aspects of Secretary of Treasury, etc., and finding out where all this money comes into and flows out to as well. That is extremely important in making sure that we stop this thing once and for all. It's absolutely nasty. It's absolutely crazy. And so with this arrest taking place, an indictment of El Mayo, and now getting this plea and the prosecution, he's going to die in a jail cell. It's great. It's definitely praiseworthy. But understand that that is nothing to the grand scheme of things, that somebody else is going to come in that's going to replace this guy. Somebody's going to come in and replace this guy, probably more insane, more bloodthirsty, more money hungry, more nuts. And the fact of the matter is, I mean, as we're looking right now with Maduro of Venezuela, now having proven to have these affiliations and connections with the CJNG and the Sinaloa cartel and the other factions of cartels all around Mexico, what if missiles or various things are brought into Mexico to attack the United States at the southern border? And when you're talking about stopping millions and billions of dollars to an insane maniac cartel leader, you're talking about people who are willing to do anything at any cost. Kamikaze type people, suiciders, etc., who will come in and do anything to preserve their business and make sure that their money's not messed with. And that's the reality of why we got to step up our game in terms of what we do and how we handle this fight, because it is really that serious. And so I wanted to bring that to your attention, chat, because I thought it was worthy enough to see how this is all playing out, and hopefully that it will, in fact, work how we intend it to go. Yeah, and I'm looking here at a couple of your guys' things. Logan says, hey, I need to deport Katie Hobbs. I agree. I absolutely agree. Kari Lake absolutely should have been the governor of Arizona. There's no reason why she shouldn't have been. I'm not sure how that all played out. You guys remember even the phone call, the leaked phone call with Kari Lake and all that took place there? Jeff DeWitt, remember that? I mean, there's a lot of things that just don't quite make a whole lot of sense in terms of what happened. Some of those things seem a little bit staged to me. I had the opportunity to encounter Kari Lake on a couple different occasions. The one thing about Kari Lake that was quite interesting, I thought she was a great person. I vouched for her. I voted for her. But what was quite interesting is that when I saw her at one of her campaign rallies, it was actually very small, by the way. I thought there would be a lot more people there. It was maybe 20 people, and this was on a university campus. I brought a camera, brought a mic, attempting to interview her, ask her some questions. She would not even step up to the plate to get on camera and talk about anything. Everybody else she was answering, she did not want, as a media person with a media pass, she didn't want to address anything, which I thought was quite odd. It seemed like several of the people who were there were kind of like set up in a way and were already pre-planned for those people to ask questions and have like questions that may have even been scripted already. It was really odd, really strange. Needless to say, Arizona has had a habitual tag of being a corrupt state on many different levels. And so it's not surprising. But I think we're one of the states where out of the states that got the approvals from Trump to have ICE come in and the National Guard and basically plug in and run operations, we're one of the few states that desperately needed that to occur, and it didn't happen. And I'm wondering why. Doesn't make sense. Absolutely crazy. So anyway, chat, as we shift gears here, speaking about insane governors and people who are in these positions of power who do not belong there whatsoever, we don't have to really go too much further than to talk about another guy who's an insane maniac. Let's kind of set the stage here, okay? We're talking about Chicago. That's become a case study, if you will, in lawlessness. We're talking about weekend after weekend, headline after headline, a war zone. Right? We're talking about double-digit shootings, children caught in crossfire, neighborhoods being terrorized by gang violence, fentanyl flowing through cartel channels right into the city. And in 2024 alone, they said more than 600 homicides were reported in Chicago, 1,000 more shootings. We're talking businesses and families fleeing, property values absolutely plummeting, and people really left behind, especially the working class, right? Minority neighborhoods living under siege constantly. And what has Illinois' leadership done? Oh, absolutely nothing. They've embraced this soft on crime prosecutors. They've passed this Safety Act, if you will, bail reforms that basically put repeat offenders back on the streets before paperwork is dry. They've tied police's hands basically behind their back while these gangs have expanded their grip. So when President Trump signals that he's ready to send in the National Guard to stabilize the city to defend innocent Americans, What does their governor say? Governor Pritzker response is not, "Thank you, sir. We appreciate it." He says, no. Stay away from us. Okay? And now here's the important constitutional point in this. The President of the United States has clear authority to deploy federal assets, including National Guard, when states are overwhelmed, when these civil rights are being trampled on, or when domestic violence makes it impossible for a state to protect its citizens. It's right in the Insurrections Act and related statutes. And so presidents from Eisenhower down to Bush have invoked it. Eisenhower, remember, he sent troops at one point to Arkansas to enforce the desegregation. George W. Bush basically sent the guards to L.A. during the 92 riots. So it's not unusual. It's not radical. It's a federal duty of a commander-in-chief when it's necessary. But these Democrats like Pritzker scream, "Oh, this guy's just authoritarian." Anytime Trump tries to assert federal power, they want chaos. Why? Because chaos fuels dependency on their broken system. Let's not forget that Pritzker is, right? He's this billionaire heir who basically bought the governor's mansion with family money, a man who turned Illinois into this sanctuary state for illegal immigrants, and even in Chicago, buckled under this migrant crisis that it couldn't handle. This is what he was doing. And the reason why these guys like to handle things this way, like Pritzker does, is because if they can get people to stay dependent on the system, then what they do is they put out forms to the federal government through their various agencies in the state to collect federal money. They get reimbursements. They get bonuses. For instance, how do I know this? Well, I know, for instance, Arizona has a rule in place for one of their agencies under a Dear Colleague letter, which is a federal letter that gets put out to the various states. For instance, Arizona gets one that gets $735 million per year that they have access to, depending on how much money they're able to collect. And that is bonus structure that goes directly into their pockets. So, of course, they're going to want to keep the people dependent on the system. But in this case, as we're speaking about Pritzker, this is the same governor who prioritized this gender-affirming policies of schools and endless pandemic restrictions, left the state's finances in ruins and the largest, in this constant crisis for a city like Chicago, for instance. And Pritzker now wants to lecture the president about security on the streets of Chicago, the same Chicago where kids can't walk into school without dodging bullets. And this is exactly what Pritzker had to say about this. Watch this.
We're here to announce.
To tell the president that his proposed actions will make our jobs harder and the lives of our residents worse. Earlier today in the Oval Office, Donald Trump looked at the assembled cameras and asked for me personally to say, "Mr. President, can you do us the honor of protecting our city?" Instead, I say, "Mr. President, do not come to Chicago." You are neither wanted here nor needed here. Your remarks about this effort over the last several weeks have betrayed a continuing slip in your mental faculties and are not fit for the auspicious office that you occupy. Most alarming, you seem to lack any appropriate concern as our commander-in-chief for the members of the military that you would so callously deploy as pawns in your ever more alarming grabs for power. As a governor, I've had to make the decision in the past to call up members of the National Guard into active service. And I think it's worth taking a moment to reflect on how seriously I take that responsibility and on the many things that I consider before asking these brave men and women to leave their homes and their communities to serve in any capacity for us. As I've said many times in the past, members of the National Guard are not trained to serve as law enforcement. They are trained for the battlefield, and they're good at it. They're not trained to arrest people and read them their Miranda rights.
And look, so here's what this whole moment is showing us, Chad. We have Democrats like Pritzker who would rather pick fights with the president than to really protect their own people, right? They scream this federal overreach when National Guard units are offered, but stay silent when fentanyl from Mexican cartels floods their neighborhoods. They're saying nothing when all these gangs are popping up and shooting people in broad daylight. Yeah, that's absolutely how it works, because that's what they want. Again, keep the people stuck to the system. They demonize law enforcement, but defend criminals' rights to roam free. They call the president a dictator for wanting law and order, but shrug off the dictatorial power of gang lords who run the entire blocks, like O Block in Chicago. So you got to ask yourself, who's really acting like the authoritarian? The president enforcing the law, or the governor demanding that Washington ignore the cries of the people? And here's the reality. Trump's not bluffing about this. If violence escalates further, if Chicago spirals into this unrest, president has the tools and the authority to act. And when he does, millions of Chicago law-abiding citizens are going to breathe easier because of it. And because at the end of the day, they don't care about Pritzker's pride. They don't care about this Democrat talking point, if you will. They care about their kids being able to go outside and play safely and know that they're going to be able to come back in alive. They care about not burying another teenager shot in some gang crossfire in Chicago. They care about survival. And so tonight, the battle is pretty clear, right? President Trump says, protect American lives, defend our cities, restore this order. And Governor Pritzker say, Mr. President, stay away from the city of Chicago and Illinois as a whole. One man speaks for American safety, and then there's this idiot that's speaking for party politics. And that's the way it always goes with the Democrat Party. It's insane. Absolutely insane. And because at the end of the day, here on the Vantes Point, we're always going to stand with the people, not the politicians who are letting their streets burn down on a continual basis. Not going to happen. And if we even want to couple on top of that, we want to talk about another idiot who's further putting his state in a hole, then we have to land on none other than Governor Gavin Newsom, right? The guy who has basically screwed the state of California. And this is some information that came out today regarding Gavin Newsom and California. Check this out.
Mr. President, Gavin Newsom, you mentioned Gavin Newsom on crime.
Gavin Newsom, yes.
Is there a federal mechanism you're hoping to use to fight back against his redistricting constitutional amendment, or is that...
Well, I think I'm going to be filing a lawsuit pretty soon, and I think we're going to be very successful in it. We're going to be filing it through the Department of Justice. That's going to happen.
So here, POTUS is basically saying that he's directed the Department of Justice to sue Newsom over what he calls this illegal redistricting in California, right? It's in direct retaliation to what happened in Texas. The president's words were extremely sharp. He says, Gavin Newsom's not going to get off easy on this one. We're going to sue him into the Stone Age. And I love that. I absolutely love that. This America First movement just declared war on California's rigged political map. And let's kind of break this down, because California already, the bluest of blue states, I mean, let's just be honest about it, just pushed through this new congressional maps that basically experts say unpack or pack up conservatives into fewer districts while splintering Republican-leaning suburbs into these Democrat-dominated seats. And so critics are calling this classic example of this illegal gerrymandering, the very practice that Democrats rail against in states like Texas and Florida. But when California does it in retaliation, they call it this equity move. They call it fairness. They call it representation. But the truth is that Newsom's scheme isn't about fair maps. It's about locking Republican voters into this permanent minority status and silencing this America First voice in the nation's largest state and cementing a one-party stranglehold for the next decade. And the truth is that California is a lot more red than what's really being said for it. And now that these ICE operations have been effective, I would like them to go back and actually test where California's at right now. And I guarantee you, the state probably completely flipped from end to end. From all the way up to the Bay, all the way down to San Diego. I mean, I can almost guarantee that there's been a major flip. But the reality is that Newsom's holding on because he's been paid by the deep state. We know that he's in the pockets of the CCP. We know that all of these things have happened. This guy is a complete and total puppet of the deep state, and he's going to do what he's told by the global cabal. And so we're going to watch to see how this whole thing plays out. This whole notion that Gavin Newsom is somehow going to be able to stand toe-to-toe with President Trump and the MAGA movement, and really just people who believe in America first. It's just not going to happen. And I think he's being destroyed bit by bit. And it's really interesting to see how this is playing out. And, we've seen corruption at multiple levels. And some people think, well, how corrupt can these politicians actually be, like Gavin Newsom, like Pritzker, like Katie Hobbs, like all these other individuals and all this stuff that's being played out in various states? How can this actually go? How deep can it go? Well, let's kind of discuss that a little bit. If we look at one of the classic examples of deep staters and how far they were willing to go, we can just talk about Bill and Hillary Clinton. And we can talk about their kill list, if you will. Those who they've offed. And I don't want to show you the whole thing. I don't want to bore you with the whole thing, but I want to show you at least a piece of this kill list documentary that I think is so interesting for us to be reminded of in terms of what these types of individuals are capable of doing. They will go to no end. They have a price, and they're willing to take that money in return, even for your life.
You, John Podesta.
I just got to the location, and his housekeeper came out and said that he unfortunately killed himself.
I did something really dumb. I'm not suicidal. I'm not suicidal.
Any comment?
No comment.
Not right now.
In November of 2009, a woman named Laura Silsby founded a nonprofit, the New Life Children's Refuge, which described its mission as attempting to rescue orphaned and abandoned children in Haiti and Dominican Republic. 2 months later, on January 29, 2010, Silsby was arrested for attempting to traffic 33 orphaned children out of Haiti without documentation.
These are some of the 33 Haitian children an American Baptist group allegedly tried to unlawfully take out of the country on Saturday.
The group's leader, Laura Silsby, says the group paid no money for the children.
The mistake obviously we made is we did not understand that there was additional paperwork required.
To me, it's pretty alarming because we're the legal parents of these children, and we give her explicit instructions not to interfere with them. For her to continue to come and try to find them, to take them to the Dominican, tells me that her intent is not actually the best.
The world would later learn through WikiLeaks that Hillary Clinton was sent email updates from Uma Abedin and other associates regarding Silsby's incarceration and developing legal case. This was not the first time Silsby found herself facing child trafficking charges. Silsby had been caught once before by Haitian police attempting to traffic 40 children out of the country. However, in that incident, no charges were brought against her, and she was merely turned back at the border. A week after Silsby was apprehended the second time, on February 7th, 2010, former President Bill Clinton appointed Silsby a lawyer by the name of Jorge Puello. Puello was successful in getting Silsby's charges reduced to 6 months. Jorge Puello also had a colorful history with human trafficking. He was convicted of operating an international sex trafficking ring involving women and underage girls out of Central America and Haiti. Puello's wife was also arrested on the same charges. In 2011, Silsby was appointed as CFO of the software company Connexus and would later become its vice president of marketing. Connexus operates AlertSense, which is the mass notification software used in FEMA's Integrated Public Alert and Warning System, or IPAWS.
The goal is to alert Americans to emergencies like severe weather and missing children.
One of IPAWS' functions is to issue Amber Alerts to the public in the event of kidnapping. The Amber Alert system was set up during Bill Clinton's presidency. In 2015, Laura Silsby married Norman Gaylor and took his last name, which is how her name now appears on the Connexus website. How does a woman who was caught multiple times attempting to traffic children internationally get promoted to the executive team of the preeminent kidnapping warning system in the country? And why did the Clintons intervene in her trial?
We're going to continue to provide support, as we do in every instance like this, to American citizens who have been charged, and hope that this matter can be resolved in an expeditious way.
The morning of July 26, 2019, Twitter users saw hashtag Clinton body count trending, just weeks before Jeffrey Epstein had reportedly committed suicide in his prison cell. The phrase Clinton body count was nothing new and had become a meme in forums across the internet years prior. It references the seemingly anomalous amount of Clinton associates who died suspiciously or under mysterious circumstances. Yvette Folger, a close friend of Clinton associate James Alefantis, gave a statement in support of Silsby during her trial. Folger is the daughter of Michael Maccabee, who coaches leaders of Nuestros Pequeños Hermanos, or NPH, a large organization that runs orphanages all over the world. Folger's son, Max Maccabee, is on the board of directors of an NPH orphanage called Friends of the Orphans, which is one of the 760 orphanages operating in Haiti and happens to be the exact orphanage from which Silsby was caught trafficking children. Curiously, Max Maccabee gave an emphatic and lengthy statement of support for Comet Pizza during a contentious neighborhood commission meeting back when the Pizzagate controversy exploded. It is also worth noting here that Frank Giustra, owner of the Radcliffe Foundation, is on the board of directors for the Clinton Foundation and is a major donor to the organization. The logo of El Pita Home, a refugee center founded by the Radcliffe Foundation, happens to be almost identical in shape and color to the boy lover symbol that the FBI declassified in 2007.
And this is just a clip that I wanted to share with you guys. Tomorrow I'll show the remaining part of it. It's a very short documentary, probably about 15 minutes left from where we are right now. But this is pure evil. You're absolutely right, Bad Moon. You're absolutely right. And I mean, there's so much of this that's taken place. The extent to which these people will go has no bounds. Now, as we cap off today, we know here on LFA TV, we start with God and we end with God. And our scripture of the day directly ties into this. It comes from 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 11 and 12. Because while these things go on, and while these people have no boundaries, and while they'll go to any extent for their money and their corruption, the scripture tells us this. But you, O man of God, O woman of God, flee these things and pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, love, patience, gentleness. Fight the good fight of faith. Amen. Now, this is what I want to bring to you in this, because corruption's not new, right? Paul warned Timothy about leaders who love money, who twisted truth, who led many different people astray. He didn't tell Timothy to run away from the world or hide off, from the mess and basically go out into the boonies and keep away from everybody. He told him, fight the good fight of faith. And that's the call to us. It's tempting to think, right? Everyone else is cutting corners. Everyone else is compromised. So why bother staying faithful ourselves? But faith is not about blending in. It's about belonging to Christ. Your integrity, your devotion, your witness matters even more when you're in the atmosphere that is polluted. Paul gives Timothy some verbs. He says, flee, pursue, and fight. Right? He said faith in a corrupt world is not passive. It means walking away from what's dirty and chasing after what's holy. It means choosing prayer over bitterness, truth over lies. That's what it means. It means generosity over greed. It means those choices preach louder than any sermon that you're ever going to be able to hear. So think about gold being refined in a fire here, chat. Heat doesn't create impurities. It exposes them so that they can be removed. Corruption around us may expose impatience, fear, or compromise in our own hearts, but God uses that to refine us. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 7 says, our faith tested by trials is more precious than gold. Right? Jesus walked through corruption, false charges, corrupt courts, compromised leaders, yet he didn't lose his faith in the Father's plan. Hebrews 12 verses 3 says, he tells us, consider him who endured such opposition from sinners so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. Faith in the midst of corruption, chat, doesn't mean pretending that it's not there. It means standing unshaken because our hope is not in men, but in Christ. So flee what corrupts. You got to pursue what's righteous, and you got to fight the good fight of faith. And this is a call for all of us, each and every one of us, to fight against this, because the world that we live in, while we are in it, we are not of it. God is calling us to holiness. He says, come out from among them and be separate, says the Lord. Touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you. God has called us to be a light shining in the midst of this darkness, so that those who are trying to find a way of escape, who don't know which way to turn, and those of us who have been given the antidote, we've been given the light, and we bear the light, that those who come may come to us, and we may lead them to the one true King, and that's Christ. That's what the gospel is. The gospel is the good news that we have this antidote, that Christ died and rose again to bridge the gap between God and man that was destroyed in the Garden of Eden, and gives us an eternal hope that exists outside the scope of this finite body that is considered the flesh. That when we die in this form, that we will exist forever with him in eternity and eternal glory. And that comes through Jesus Christ. And so maybe you're watching this and maybe you felt like, man, I want to turn my life to God. I want to say a quick prayer with you. Would you repeat this after me? Say, Lord Jesus, I'm a sinner. Come into my heart today and forgive me of my sin. I receive salvation, your salvation, that you died and rose again on the third day. And I surrender my life to you now. Be my Lord and be my Savior. In Jesus' name, amen. Chad, I want to thank you so much for joining here with me today during the Vantes Point Hour. We'll be back again tomorrow and for the rest of the week, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. I look forward to seeing all of you there. And thank you so much for all your support. It means the world to me. If you want to drop a donation and support, continue to do so directly through my website, joeyvantes.com. I'll throw the site back up for you again as we sound off here. You can go down to the bottom of the page, joeyvantes.com, and you can drop in a donation to support the movement and all we're doing. We greatly appreciate anything you can contribute, and we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. God bless all of you, and good night.